Us right now with more is North Korea expert, the director of defense studies at the Center for the National Interest, Harry Kazianis. Harry, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Did I mess up your name there, Harry?
It's okay. Everybody does. Don't worry about it. I'm used to it.
Tell me how to pronounce it.
Kazianis.
Kazianis. Thank you, Harry. All right, Harry Kazianis. What do you make of this latest launch out of North Korea?
Well, it's extremely troubling. I mean, this is something that we are going to see in the months and years to come. Because keep in mind, where North Korea is geographically is a really bad place to test missiles. When you think about the United States or Russia, they have large land masses to test these missiles. But the North Koreans, they can't just keep shooting missiles up and down into the air. They're going to need to test their medium and long-range missiles in essentially what are battlefield conditions. The only way to do that is to fire them over Japan and into the mid-Pacific. And here's what's even more scary about this. The Japanese do not have an effective way to shoot down the type of missile, an intermediate-range ballistic missile, that went over their territory yesterday. So that makes this even all the more scary.
So you wrote an op-ed recently that a war with North Korea would be a war like no other. Tell us more.
Well, the challenge here is that the American people are vigilant people, but we have not fought a war on the scale that North Korea would bring to us really since World War II. Keep in mind, the North Koreans, they don't have just nuclear weapons or long-range missiles, but we think they have probably 5,000 tons of chemical weapons, things like VX. They probably have biological weapons, some of the most nasty, horrific weapons you can think of. Plus, they have over 11,000 artillery tubes that are pointed at Seoul. That's a capital with 25 million people. Imagine this. Imagine in a war with North Korea if they fired just a few hundred artillery shells into downtown Seoul and started knocking off skyscrapers. Imagine a situation that's 10 or 15 9/11s. That's what we're facing.
But, Harry, hi, this is Jason Chaffetz. So there's talk of more sanctions. I can't believe that they haven't already maxed those out. Do you really think sanctions would actually do anything? And at what point does the United States, in conjunction with South Korea and Japan, take proactive measures or take down one of these missiles to demonstrate that we have the ability to actually knock it out if they're going to shoot one? And by the way, they keep shooting them over Japan. They don't need to shoot them to the east. They could shoot a few to the west, but they're never going to do that.
You're right, Jason. Good morning. I think the thing here that's most important that the president needs to do is the president needs to go on Twitter right now or at the earliest possible time and direct his message to China and say, look, you have signed on to 9 different United Nations Security Council resolutions. When are you going to enforce them, Beijing? The Chinese are the key here in this. Something the president said all the way back in the campaign, and people laughed at him, which was ridiculous. The Chinese control 90% of North Korea's exports. If they shut down the amount of money that they're literally taking in from the North Koreans, we would be able to cut that economy off cold. Keep in mind, the North Korean economy is their weakness. It's only worth something like $14 billion. If we were able to cut them off from the economic system of this planet, they would be in a tremendous challenge, and they would not be able to
outside.
Go ahead.
But Harry, China knows that we can't do that unilaterally. Even with, say, Secretary Mnuchin referencing at least the potential for cutting off trade with China, and not naming China in name, but it would take every trading partner of China. And China also understands that it has great sway over the United States and great economic power because we are so reliant on that nation to buy our debt and ship us cheap goods.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, you walk into any Walmart and it's basically China Inc. But the point here is that we have that leverage as well. Keep in mind, the U.S.-China trade relationship is worth almost $700 billion, but it's very dependent on Beijing selling us all sorts of goods. So I think if we put pressure on them, and President Trump went on Twitter and said, look, if your banks are going to continually help North Korea launder money and help essentially fund their nuclear program, we're going to put sanctions on your banks. Now, you could start that very slowly and slowly ratchet up the pressure, but it's something we have to do if they don't stop.
I think they have been doing that.
Harry, just so I understand, you're recommending tougher sanctions, meaning at the UN you would have gone, full stop on oil, period. So no oil exporting. As opposed to what they got today, fractional. And then I would say, secondly, are you saying a trade embargo with all China, or are you just saying sanctions on the banks? Because sanctions on the banks is not going to move the needle as far as everyone thinks.
Well, you know what? I would start with at least the president actually making some warnings to the Chinese and giving them, maybe 30 days grace to stop these illegal activities. And when it comes to an oil embargo, there's something a lot of people don't know. The North Koreans have been preparing for that for a long time. They've actually stockpiled, we think, a year's worth of oil. So that's something that we'd have to keep in mind. What I would do is if I was Secretary Tillerson or Nikki Haley, I'd go to the UN and I'd say the North Koreans need to stop exporting their citizens and using them as slave labor. That's worth $2 billion to the North Korean economy. That would have a tremendous impact in them being able to modernize their nuclear program. That's something we can do.
One real quick last question. Do you think President Moon, have you seen the South Koreans move on this issue? Because he had a very dove-like approach, and it's getting more and more serious. Do you see President Moon actually moving the South Koreans to understand the seriousness of this?
I have. And initially during his presidential campaign not long ago, he actually was talking about removing the THAAD ballistic missile defense system. They're not doing that anymore, so they have moved a little bit. Absolutely.
All right, we will leave it there. Harry, thanks very much for weighing in this morning. We appreciate it. We will see you soon. Harry Kazianis there.